What's up guys, Perry from Rockville here, and today I'm going to show you how to set the crossover on your car subwoofer amplifier. The main purpose of setting the crossover on your subwoofer amp is to have nothing but bass and low end playing through your subwoofer. By filtering out the high end of your subwoofer, the full range speakers have the room to play the mid and high range frequencies, while your subwoofer handles all the low end. Now when setting the crossover on your sub amp, the settings may be dependent on the type of amp you're using, as well as the type of enclosure your sub or subs are in, whether it's vented or sealed. But don't worry, we're gonna go over what you do for all of those setups. So let me give you guys the lowdown of our setup here. Here we have the main head unit, which is powering these two full range speakers. The head unit is connected to our external monoblock amplifier through RCA cables and is powering our subs here. If you want to know how to install an amplifier to your car, check out our video on that. And if you want to know how to set the gain for your subs on your amp, check out our video on that as well. So right off the bat, we want to make sure that the EQ on our head unit is set to a flat EQ with no bass boost or anything like that. This way the music is unaffected while we're setting the crossover on our amp. Now the main thing we'll be adjusting here is the low pass filter, which will allow the frequencies below our set point to pass through the sub. For example, if I set it to 100 Hertz, everything below 100 Hertz is going to be passed through the sub, but you won't be hearing anything above 100 Hertz. The other thing we'll be adjusting is the subsonic high pass filter, which is a type of high pass filter that will block out the lowest audible frequencies. For example, if I set it at 30 Hertz, everything from 30 Hertz and above will be heard, but nothing will be heard from 30 Hertz or below. So the result is you'll be hearing everything from 30 Hertz to 100 Hertz coming through the sub. Now for a more accurate setup, we're going to want to know the specific frequency ranges of the full range speakers and the subwoofers that we're using in our setup. We also need to know if our sub enclosure is vented or not. Now if our enclosure is vented, we actually want to set the subsonic filter first. There's actually a difference in setting the subsonic filter if the enclosure you're working with is sealed or vented. When setting the subsonic filter for your vented enclosure, you're going to want to set it an octave below the tuning frequency of that enclosure. You can always find out the tuning frequency of your enclosure through the owner's manual or the manufacturer's specification. So for example, the tuning frequency of our subwoofer, the DB12K61, is 35.6 Hertz. Now you're going to want to take that number and divide it by 4, which equals out to 8.9. Then you subtract that from our tuning frequency of 35.6, which equals out to 26.7 Hertz. Now that's a great place to start, but it's still relative to how you think it sounds in the end. So you can start with this point and see how you like it from there. You just don't want to go below 26 Hertz because that will cause subwoofer unloading, which is when the sub has no back pressure from the enclosure and starts to exert uncontrollably, acting as if it were in free air. This can lead to damaging your woofers in the end. Now for sealed enclosures, you can leave the subsonic filter all the way to the left or totally open. You don't need a subsonic filter for your sealed enclosure, but if you do want a little more kick out of your amp, you can filter out those really low frequencies like 25 Hertz and below that take up a lot of power from your amp. By doing this, the amp then has more power to give to the other frequencies being used by the sub. So now we can move on to setting our low pass filter. In order to accurately set our low pass filter, we're going to want to know the frequency range of our full range speakers. Now the full range speakers we're using today, the Polk 692s, have a frequency range of 60 Hertz to 22 kilohertz. Now crossovers work more like a slope as opposed to a hard cut between frequency ranges. So with that in mind, we'll set the low pass filter to 75 Hertz so that our full range speakers can play so that we have a full spectrum of sound between the subs and the full range speakers. Now if you don't know the frequency range of your full range speakers, that's totally fine too, because we can also use our ears to set the low pass filter for our sub. To do this, we'll first start by setting the low pass filter to 250 Hertz. Now you'll want to play a song that you're very familiar with that's also heavy in bass so that you have an idea of how you want everything to sound in the end. So now as the song is playing, we're gonna lower the low pass filter to the point where we're hearing the bassier stuff in our mix, like the bass guitar, the kick drum, and all of the really low notes of the song. If the song has vocals, a great trick to use is to lower the low pass filter to the point where you're not hearing any vocals coming through the sub. So right now we have some music playing through the sub. There's vocals in this track that you'll hear through the sub because it's set at the 250 Hertz. So we'll start to bring that low pass filter down. So now we're hearing less of the vocals, more of those bass tones from the bass and the kick. And now we're just hearing bass and kick, which is right where we want it to be. So now this is what it'll sound like with the full spectrum of sound. Yeah, nice. You're hearing that high to mid range through the full range speakers, and you're hearing all of that low end coming through the sub. Awesome. Now I just want to point out that your ears are going to be your best tools when setting the crossover. Even when we do know the frequency range of the full range speakers, we can always adjust above or below where we set the low pass filter based on what we feel sounds best. So hopefully this showed you guys how easy it is to set the crossover on your car subwoofer amplifier. But of course, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to our customer support team through phone or email. As always, I'm Perry from Rockville, and we'll see you guys next time.